Welcome back to the Deep Dive, the place where we turn complex research into practical, immediate knowledge you can use today.
Today, we are focusing on a concept that seems almost simple on the surface, but the science shows it is the absolute prerequisite for success, for growth, and for effective leadership.
We're talking about self-awareness, and our mission for this deep dive is to move it beyond that sort of vague, touchy-feely perception.
Exactly. We're stripping that away and diving straight into the actionable science, the frameworks and the tools you can actually use to build this skill.
And I think we have to start with a statistic that it floored me when I first read it in the source material. It's this astonishing gap between how we see ourselves and what the reality is.
It really is the statistic that grounds this entire conversation. The research shows that something like 95% of people, they genuinely believe they are self-aware.
95%. That's almost everyone.
Almost everyone. They're convinced they know what makes them tick, how they show up in the world. But when researchers use objective psychological measures, that number it completely collapses.
To what?
Only 10 to 15% of people actually possess true, measurable self-awareness.
Wow. So that's an 80, maybe 85% failure rate? I mean, if you were an engineer and 85% of your bridges collapsed, you'd be out of a job.
You would. And that disconnect, that's why this topic needs a deep dive. To close that gap, we need a really robust definition to start with.
Okay, so let's define our terms. What are we actually talking about when we say self-awareness?
We're talking about a combination of two critical abilities. The first is deep self-knowledge. That's, the internal look at your thoughts, your emotions, your core values.
The what's going on inside part.
Exactly. And the second part, which is just as important, is the ability to actively use that knowledge to monitor yourself and, crucially, to understand the impact you're having on your decisions and on other people.
So it's not just navel-gazing. It's not just looking in the mirror and saying, yep, that's me. It's understanding the engine, right, and then actually being able to steer the car.
That's a perfect analogy. And it links directly to this idea of control. Self-aware people are just demonstrably better at self-control because they see the trigger coming.
So they can anticipate their own reactions.
Precisely. This leads to much greater situational awareness and, a more proactive stance toward life. They aren't just letting things happen to them. They're actively shaping their environment based on this well-calibrated internal compass.
Okay, so let's unpack that scientifically. If self-awareness is the key that unlocks so much, we need to get into the different dimensions that psychologists use. What are the cornerstones here?
The first, and probably the most important cornerstone, is its role in emotional intelligence, or EI.
Right, Daniel Goleman's work.
Exactly. His research, going back to the mid-90s, and confirmed by study after study, like one at MIT in 2012, places self-awareness as the absolute, non-negotiable first component of EI.
So it's the starting gate. You can't even get in the race without it. But why is it the first part? Why is it so essential?
Because the whole structure of EI is sequential. It moves from self-awareness to self-regulation, then to social awareness, and finally to managing relationships. You can't skip a step.
I see.
You can't accurately see your own emotions, your own biases, your automatic reactions. Then you have absolutely no hope of regulating them effectively.
And if you're a mess internally,
You certainly can't hope to effectively read or manage the complex emotions of other people. High EI is the currency of great leadership, of building positive teams, and every single bit of it, traces back to that initial internal audit.
you can't lead anyone else if you aren't leading yourself. That makes perfect sense.
Exactly. And to do that audit right, we have to distinguish between the two main dimensions of self-awareness. There's internal and there's external.
And they require different kinds of work, I imagine.
Completely different. Let's start with internal. This is really about your inner landscape.
This subjective experience.
Right. It's that deep, sophisticated understanding of your core self. Your values, what really motivates you, your beliefs, the whole spectrum of your emotions. It means going past the surface.
Can you get an example?
Sure. It's not enough to just say, I'm frustrated right now. Internal awareness is asking, okay, why is this specific email making me feel this way? Is it just the words on the screen, or is it tapping into a deeper feeling of being disrespected, which violates my core value of autonomy?
So knowing the why behind the what.
That is the defining feature of high internal self-awareness. And that leads us right to the other side of the coin, external self-awareness.
And this is where I suspect a lot of people in that 95% group really fall short.
Absolutely. This is the outward-facing piece. It's the ability to accurately gauge the impression you're making on other people. Can you see yourself through the eyes of your colleague, your partner?
Which is vital, right? Otherwise, you're just operating in a vacuum.
A very dangerous vacuum. It determines how well you align your behavior with social norms and, really importantly, whether you can make constructive changes that actually land with other people.
So if I think I'm being a decisive, firm leader, but my team just sees me as an unapproachable tyrant.
Then the gap between your internal and your external awareness is causing massive, massive problems. And this tension, this measurement of the gap, is captured perfectly in the theory of objective self-awareness.
Okay, that sounds important. Who came up with that?
Two researchers, Duvall and Wickland, back in 1972. And their theory is essential for understanding why changing ourselves is just so incredibly difficult.
Okay, so how does it explain that difficulty?
The theory, it basically posits that whenever our attention is focused on ourselves, like, you look in a mirror, you watch a recording of yourself speak, or you get some direct feedback, we automatically engage in what they call self-evaluation.
So we start judging ourselves.
Instantly. We compare our current behavior against our internal standards of correctness, our goals, our values, our morals.
So that moment when a leader gets their 360-degree review back, that's a moment of objective self-awareness.
It's a profound and often really painful moment. If there's alignment, great. But the second we detect a discrepancy, a conflict between our ideal self and how we actually acted, we feel bad.
We feel inadequate, guilty.
Or ashamed, yeah. And at that point, the theory says we have two choices. And this is the crux of the whole problem. We can either work to reduce that discrepancy by changing our behavior,
Goal.
or we can just avoid the self-evaluation entirely.
And since change is hard and slow, the path of least resistance is avoidance. Just shut down the feedback loop. Don't look in the mirror.
Exactly. Avoiding that negative feeling, that feeling of failure, is such a powerful psychological drive. The theory emphasizes that our decision to even try to change depends on whether we believe it'll work.
So if the gap is too big, we just give up before we start.
Precisely. If the discrepancy is massive, say, I want to be a patient mentor, but I yelled at 3 people this week, and if I feel like improvement will be monumentally slow or even impossible, I'm far more likely to avoid the mirror, ignore the feedback, or just rationalize my behavior to escape the discomfort.
That's a really powerful insight. A leader who is constantly making excuses is basically just avoiding the painful work of self-awareness.
Like they're lowering the bar or blaming the scale rather than facing the fact that they're not living up to their own values. It's a self-protection mechanism run amok.
So the practical application of this is to change, you actually have to believe that change is possible.
You have to. You have to cultivate the belief that small incremental effort will start to close that painful gap. If you only focus on the huge unattainable standard, you'll just paralyze yourself.
Okay, so let's move from the why to the so what.
Mhm.
Why is this skill not just for personal growth, but, as the research says, the strongest predictor of leadership success?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the measurable outcomes.
Yes, we have to ground this in tangible value. The work of John Mattone gives us a great framework, 10 powerful advantages that show how self-awareness translates directly into performance, culture, and, critically, the bottom line.
It moves it from a nice to have to a must have.
Absolutely. The first advantage is the most obvious one, but it's foundational. Achieving a clear grasp of your personal capabilities and, just as important, your deficiencies.
Knowing your strengths and weaknesses.
But really knowing them. Self-aware leaders know their signature strengths and how to deploy them. But more importantly, they know their Achilles heel. They know where they're weak, and they can either delegate those tasks or proactively take corrective measures.
Instead of just letting their weaknesses drag the whole team down.
Exactly. Which leads directly to the second advantage, and this is the one that gets the attention of the C-suite: stronger financial performance.
So you can actually connect self-awareness to return on investment.
You can. Research consistently shows a link between higher levels of self-aware leadership in an organization and demonstrably higher shareholder returns. It's a positive ROI.
Why, though? What's the mechanism there?
Well, self-aware leaders tend to foster high-trust environments. They're quicker to spot and fix problems in the organization, and crucially, they make decisions based on reality, not on their own ego.
That makes the cost of a lack of self-awareness seem extremely high. What about the quality of the decisions themselves?
That's benefit number 3, sharper decision-making. This is a cognitive benefit. Self-awareness helps leaders understand their own built-in biases.
Like confirmation bias, for instance.
Exactly. If you know you have a tendency to only look for information that confirms what you already believe, you can actively build in checks and balances. You can intentionally seek out dissenting opinions before you finalize a big strategy.
So you're building a better internal immune system against bad choices.
That's a great way to put it. And it helps you understand your emotional triggers so you don't let a spike of anger or fear skew a high-stakes judgment. This all leads to benefit number 4, greater leadership maturity.
And what does maturity mean in this context?
It means intentional, continuous personal growth. Self-aware leaders are always adjusting their style, adopting new habits, shedding old, ineffective ones. They see change not as a threat, but as an opportunity to optimize.
And since leadership is so much about relationships, how does this affect the people side of things?
Critically, that's the 5th benefit. Healthier relationships and much better, well-defined boundaries.
How so?
When you know your own emotional needs, your own energy levels, you're better able to set boundaries that prevent you from burning out. And in doing so, you model that constructive, respectful interaction for your whole team. It just reduces all the friction.
It also sounds like it allows a leader to be more authentic.
Which is number 6, goal alignment. A self-aware leader makes sure their professional goals are actually in sync with their fundamental personal values.
So you're not climbing a ladder that's leaning against the wrong wall.
Precisely. If your core value is family, but your goals require you to work 80 hours a week, self-awareness is the alarm bell that goes off. It tells you that success will feel hollow, and it lets you course correct toward genuine fulfillment.
And I'm guessing that internal clarity makes for better external communication.
Absolutely. That's advantage 7, improved communication. Because they understand their own emotional language, they're just naturally better communicators. They're also more skilled at reading the emotions and behaviors of their team.
Which feeds right into number 8, which is just higher overall effectiveness.
It does. A leader has to constantly monitor their own influence. Am I motivating people or am I accidentally intimidating them? A self-aware leader can make those small, precise adjustments in real time to maximize their impact.
That continuous adjustment sounds key. Okay, what about the last 2? They deal more with risk and culture, right?
Yes. Number 9 is a reduced risk of unethical behavior. Self-awareness is deeply connected to your moral compass. It's the internal feedback system that flags those small deviations before they become catastrophic ethical failures.
It stops the slippery slope.
It provides the friction to stop it. And finally, number 10 is that self-awareness is simply the stable foundation on which you have to build all other critical leadership skills. Strategic thinking, influence, delegation, all of it.
That's a really compelling list. But we started with the 85% gap, so let's talk about the pain of being in that 85%. What are the real, tangible consequences of a leader who lacks external self-awareness?
The cost is profound. You measure it in lost talent and toxic cultures. Unaware leaders are just blind to the reality they create for other people.
They live in an echo chamber.
A total echo chamber of their own, likely inflated view of themselves. They fail to see the things that are driving their employees away. Poor communication, favoritism, a lack of recognition, because they literally can't perceive their own damaging behavior.
So they genuinely believe they're an inspiring, great leader, while their entire team is on LinkedIn looking for a new job.
That is the reality in so many organizations. This lack of external awareness means their behavior is completely misaligned with their intended outcome. They're constantly, as the source material says, unknowingly stepping on toes or alienating colleagues.
And they have no idea why.
None. They lose the ability to persuade, to negotiate, and they completely erode the trust and loyalty you need for a high-performing team. At the end of the day, they become the biggest obstacle to the very goals they claim to be chasing.
The need is clear. The payoff is huge. The cost of not having it is, frankly, terrifying. So how do we do it? How do we cross that 80 to 85% gap? Let's get into the actionable toolkit.
Yes, the how-to. We have to begin with a critical shift in how we practice self-reflection. We have to overcome what's called the introspection paradox.
A paradox. So trying to look inward can actually make things worse.
It can, if you do it incorrectly. And most people do. We risk making ourselves miserable without achieving any real growth.
How does that happen? What's the trap?
The trap is asking why questions. We sit down and we ask ourselves, why am I so anxious before big meetings? Or why did I snap at my kids this morning?
Which seem like reasonable questions to ask.
They seem reasonable, but the problem is that the true underlying reasons for our feelings are often unconscious, or they're rooted in complex past experiences. There's rarely a single, simple answer.
So if we can't find the real answer, what does our brain do?
It invents one. Our brain hates a vacuum, so we just grab the easiest, most available explanation, which is often completely wrong. And this leads to rumination.
Just replaying the negative event over and over.
Exactly, and generating these automatic negative thoughts, or ANTS. You get stuck in this judgmental circular narrative of, I'm a bad parent, or I'm a failure, which is totally unproductive and actually prevents positive change.
That cycle of miserable self-blame is...
Oh, well, yeah, that sounds very familiar. So what's the fix? How do we get out of the why trap? You have to consciously supplant why introspection with what introspection. It's a simple word change, but it shifts everything.
From blame to action.
Precisely. Instead of asking, why do I always procrastinate? You ask, what are the specific situations that make me procrastinate? What can I do to change those situations in the future?
The what questions immediately search for a solution. They're empowering.
Because they bear the seeds of the solution within them. You move from the paralyzing question, why am I so angry, to the constructive one. What specific event triggered this anger? What were my options for responding? And what is the better option I can plan to use next time? It keeps the whole process curious and forward-looking, not judgmental and stuck in the past.
Okay, so with that huge philosophical shift in place, what are the core daily practices we should be integrating?
The first, and maybe most fundamental, is mindfulness and reflection. And a lot of people think meditation is about clearing your mind, but for self-awareness, it's about something else.
What's the real goal then?
The goal is to create distance from your reactionary self. It's to practice letting your thoughts and feelings just bubble up, recognizing them for what they are, just fleeting neurological events, and then letting them pass without getting hooked.
So the thought arrives, but I don't have to become the thought. I can be the observer of the thought.
That is the key distinction. In a high-stress moment, your brain wants to jump right into that reactive System 1 thinking. Mindfulness practice trains you to pause and inhabit the reflective, self-aware System 2 self.
And the more you practice in quiet, the easier it is to do in the heat of the moment.
Infinitely easier. It gives you that crucial half-second to choose a constructive response instead of just reacting. And once you can observe your thoughts, the next step is to get better at decoding the data they contain. That's where emotional literacy comes in.
Okay, so this is about having a better vocabulary for our feelings.
It's foundational. Most of us operate with a few big emotional buckets: happy, sad, angry, stressed. To develop literacy, you need to get fluent in the nuances. Can you tell the difference between feeling sad and feeling disappointed or frustrated versus overwhelmed?
And why is that specific label so important? Isn't I feel bad good enough?
It's not, because the specific label contains the data about what you need. If you just label a feeling as stressed, your solution might be to just avoid the work. But if you realize the feeling is specifically overwhelmed by the scope of the project, the solution becomes breaking the task down into smaller steps.
The label points to the action.
It does. Disappointment suggests an expectation wasn't met, which prompts a conversation. And a huge part of this is overcoming the idea that some emotions are bad. Anger isn't bad, it's data. It signals a boundary has been crossed. Fear isn't bad. It signals potential threat. Seeing them as helpful messengers is incredibly liberating.
So every emotion is just a piece of information that needs to be investigated, not suppressed.
Exactly. A great way to investigate is the third practice, tuning into your body sensations. Our emotions manifest physically in really consistent, predictable patterns.
Can you give me an example of that?
Sure. Research shows that anger is consistently associated with increased sensation in the chest and upper limbs, that feeling of heat or tension. Sadness, on the other hand, is often linked to decreased sensation in the limbs, that heavy, leaden feeling.
So if I can train myself to notice that tightness in my stomach, I can identify it as, say, anxiety, and then deal with the data before it spirals into a mental catastrophe.
You've created a reliable physical metric for a subjective internal state. And once you have these insights, from mindfulness, from emotional literacy, from your body, the fourth practice becomes essential: journaling and tracking.
You need to write it down to see the patterns.
You have to. Writing down your feelings, the triggers, the body sensations, helps you spot those deep, multi-layered patterns that are otherwise invisible. It's about creating your own personal behavior science lab.
It's accountability and validation all in one.
It is. You start to see how external factors, like your sleep or who you spend time with, affect your internal state. We even saw that interesting corporate example of using a feelings whiteboard in an office.
Right, divided by morning, noon, and evening.
And team members Just check off what they're feeling.
Yeah.
It gives this clear visual map of the team's collective emotional landscape. You can spot a pattern, like, wow, every Tuesday afternoon, everyone's energy just craters. What's happening in our schedule then? It's powerful data.
And all of these practices, they cultivate this independence, right?
Yeah.
Spending that time alone, reflecting and tracking, it makes you more stable, which ironically probably makes your relationships with others much healthier.
It does, because you're no longer relying on them for your sense of validation or stability. You're generating it internally.
Okay, that covers the internal work. Let's pivot to the external dimension. We established that you can't see the label from inside the jar. To break out of that 95%, we need honest, objective input from the outside. How do we do that without getting defensive?
External input is absolutely non-negotiable. And the biggest enemy is denial, which is just our ego trying to protect itself. So the first step is to actively seek honest feedback, but you have to be very strategic about it.
Right, because when I've asked for feedback, I either get vague flattery or something unhelpful like, you could be more strategic.
You have to neutralize the flattery. You need to find a small group of trusted people, colleagues, mentors, friends, who have seen you at your best and your worst and who genuinely want you to succeed. And when you ask them, you have to be specific.
How specific?
And ask for examples. Don't ask, am I a good manager? Ask, in the budget meeting last Tuesday, what was one specific thing I did that was effective? And what was one specific thing I did that was distracting or unhelpful?
That forces them to give you evidence. They can't just give you fluff.
It holds them accountable to objectivity. And then your job is to just listen. No defending, no explaining, just absorbing. And then a really profound, self-aware action that can follow that feedback is the willingness to make amends.
And you mean more than just a quick, I'm sorry?
Much more. This is where we see parallels to things like step 9 of the 12 steps. A sincere apology requires deep self-awareness, humility, and specificity. You have to be able to articulate the detailed harm you caused and show you understand the impact it had on the other person.
Can you give an example of the difference?
Sure. A weak apology is, sorry I was aggressive in that meeting. A self-aware apology is, I recognize that I was aggressive in that meeting, and by cutting you off repeatedly, I made you feel unheard, which caused you to withdraw, and that ultimately undermined our shared goal.
Wow, that level of detail shows you've really done the internal work. You've connected your action to the external consequence.
And that makes you far less likely to do it again because you've fully internalized the cost. Now, beyond personal feedback, we can also use structured tools to get an objective baseline.
You're talking about things like personality assessment.
Exactly. Frameworks like DISC, the Enneagram, or the Big Five model provide this non-judgmental starting point for reflection. They give you a language for your natural tendencies.
The Big Five, or OCEAN, is often called the gold standard, right? Let's break that down for our listeners.
The Big Five is highly reliable. The O stands for openness to experience, your level of creativity and curiosity. C is for conscientiousness, how organized and disciplined you are. E is for extroversion, your sociability and assertiveness. A is for agreeableness, your tendency to be compassionate and cooperative. And N is for neuroticism, which is often measured inversely as emotional stability.
So for leadership success, which of those factors are the most powerful predictors?
The research points very consistently to two: high conscientiousness and high extroversion.
Why does two?
Well, high conscientiousness translates into dependability, organization, and sticking to goals. They get things done. High extroversion is crucial for influencing and motivating large groups because it includes assertiveness and social energy.
And a self-aware leader uses this data how?
They use it for self-correction. For example, a leader who knows they are naturally very high in agreeableness might struggle to make a necessary but unpopular decision. Being aware of that tendency allows them to consciously compensate for it when the situation demands it.
It's powerful data. Now, for a more hands-on visual tool, you mentioned the Circle of Life exercise.
Yes, this is a fantastic tool for a holistic self-check. You just draw a circle and divide it into 8 pie slices, each representing a core area of your life, career, health, relationships, finances, and so on.
And then you rate yourself in each area.
Exactly. You decide what a 10 out of 10 would look like in each slice, and then you honestly assess where you are right now from 0 at the center to 10 at the edge, and you shade it in.
And the resulting image of the wheel must be a pretty jarring visualization of where your life is out of balance.
It is. It graphically shows you if your wheel is lopsided. Maybe your career is a 9, but your health is a 2. It forces you to confront which areas need the most immediate attention to bring your life back into alignment with your stated values. It's all about bringing that necessary objectivity to your internal story.
We've covered the psychology. Now let's jump into the future. How is technology changing our ability to become more self-aware in a long-term, objective way?
This brings us to the really fascinating field of life logging. This is basically the continuous systematic collection of objective data from the devices we all carry, our phones, our smartwatches, to analyze and predict our own physical and psychological states in real time.
So we're using hard sensor data to measure our soft, subjective internal states? That sounds like the ultimate bridge for that 95% to 10% gap.
It absolutely is. Life logging creates a quantifiable link between objective data like your activity levels, your sleep patterns, your communication frequency, and subjective states like your mood or personality. It gives us a granular long-term timeline of our own behavior that we could never get from just filling out a questionnaire.
So what are some of the specific applications researchers are working on with this?
There are four main areas. The first is predicting sleep quality based on your daytime activities. So instead of just tracking your sleep, the models use your daily data to predict in advance how well you're going to sleep.
That's preventative self-awareness. You can change your behavior during the day to get a better night's sleep.
Exactly. The second application is personality detection. By analyzing long-term patterns in your daily life records, these models can predict your big five personality traits with surprising accuracy. It's a much richer way to understand yourself than a one-off test.
And what about something more volatile, like mood?
That's the third application.
Yeah.
Real-time mood detection and prediction. Our mood is constantly shifting, but life log data, things like the tone of your voice on calls, your typing speed, changes in your movement, can provide constant input to models that detect and even predict your mood.
Which would be huge for managing mental well-being.
It would. And that leads to the fourth and perhaps most important application, early depression detection. By using these continuous records to spot prolonged periods of abnormal mood or behavior, life logging could make real-time mental health intervention possible. It could provide an early warning system.
That's an incredible amount of very personal data being collected. What about privacy?
That's the biggest hurdle, and the researchers are very aware of it. The methodology they're developing emphasizes that these predictive models should be lightweight enough to run locally on your own device.
So the data never has to leave your phone.
Correct. This decentralized approach protects your privacy while still enabling that long-term, stable self-tracking you need for the models to work.
You know, it's interesting. This high-tech endeavor is really just the newest version of a very ancient pursuit.
Absolutely. From Marcus Aurelius's journals to Ben Franklin's list of virtues, humans have always used tools to track their internal state against their ideals. Technology is just giving us richer, more objective data to continue that age-old quest to know thyself.
And we see the ultimate expression of this in people who learn to trust their own internal data over all the external noise. I'm thinking of that Gary Vaynerchuk story.
It's a perfect example of aligning your actions with your deep self-knowledge. He talks about being in the fourth grade and just realizing that he was failing science tests over and over.
And he decided that was okay?
He decided it was acceptable. He was self-aware enough to know that his true skills and passions were in business, in selling baseball cards and wine. He trusted his internal compass that said, "This is your path," over the external standard that said, "You must be a good student."
He consciously chose to eat the pain of a bad report card a few times a year because he knew, deep down, he was better off focusing his energy where it really mattered for his own definition of success.
And that is the ultimate goal of self-awareness, to have an internal measurement of value that is so strong, so well-calibrated, that you can trust it to guide your energy and your focus no matter what the world is telling you.
So what does this all mean for you, for the listener, who's trying to be a better leader or a better partner or just a more fulfilled person? We started with that incredible disconnect, right? 95% think they're self-aware, but only 10 to 15% really are.
I think the final crucial takeaway is that self-awareness is not a trait you're born with. It's a strategic learned skill that you have to practice and refine continuously.
It takes courage.
It takes immense courage. The courage to look at yourself objectively, to ask what instead of why, to become fluent in your own emotional data, and maybe the hardest part, to actively ask for and integrate honest feedback from others.
And all of that work is for one reason.
One reason: to use the information you gain to make positive, constructive changes that align your actions with your deepest values. That alignment is the pathway to fulfillment.
You know, we touched on how self-awareness helps us understand interpersonal dynamics and that idea from emotional intelligence research about our two competing needs.
the need for belonging and the need for distinction. Optimal distinctiveness. We want to fit in with our group, but we also have this deep, deep need to stand out and be seen as unique individuals.
And that tension is always there, negotiating our choices.
It's a constant negotiation.
Yeah.
And so, to bring this deep dive to a close, here's a final reflection for you to consider. What is one established pattern, one core belief, or one value, maybe something you picked up in your childhood or early in your career, that you haven't really challenged in years?
We'd encourage you to question it, not with that paralyzing judgmental why, but with the curiosity of the what approach we talked about. Ask yourself, what are the specific ways this old belief might be holding me back today?
And then ask, what is the smallest, most immediate action I can take this week to test if this belief is still true for me, if it's still serving me? Self-awareness is that continuous evolution. The data is available, the tools are there. Now's the time to run that internal audit.
That is a powerful and proactive thought to end on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into self-awareness. We'll be back soon with more insights from the cutting edge of research.